more on this discussion. We're joined by Caitlin Huey-Burns, national reporter for Real Clear Politics. Caitlin, thank you so much for being
Good morning.
with
Morning,
us.
Jamie.
You know, this is
Caitlin.
really... I'm
Morning,
Jamie.
Jamie.
This is Caitlin. Hello. This is Errol. I want to talk about, though, how unprecedented is it really for a president to be so outspoken during this transition between presidents?
It is certainly rare. And what's interesting about this is that Donald Trump has not had a press conference, which presidents-elect usually do. That's usually how we see them in the public, talking about what they want to do, introducing their cabinet picks and so forth. They usually do that. Donald Trump has not done that, instead taking to Twitter to really use it as kind of a bully pulpit during the transition process. He has traveled around the country on his thank you tour, but he's also really used Twitter to fight back at criticisms, to, as Janet mentioned, talk about foreign policy, and a lot of times it's at odds with what the current administration is doing. And, you know, transitioning from one party to the next often has these kinds of hitches, but this is much more pronounced, of course, with his use of Twitter.
I remember during the handover from President Bush to President Obama, you had the financial crisis. There were so many questions of what President-elect Obama would do, and he made sure to kind of stay out of the media discussion while holding meetings behind the scenes. In what way do you think Donald Trump's use of Twitter and distancing himself from his staff in some cases, where he'll say one thing online and they will say, actually, no, there's a different story. For example, the friction between the transition and the White House. Trump says there's a little bit, the team says they're being generous. What impact could this have long term, even when he becomes president?
Well, Donald Trump uses Twitter for a couple different things. One, certainly to talk directly to his supporters without the lens of the press, without going through the filter, he says, of the press. It's a way for him to circumvent the media that he distrusts by and large. Another reason, though, is that it speaks directly to reporters who are on Twitter, right? Most Americans are not following his every tweet, but they see it kind of disseminated through reporting and other mediums, really. So he uses it to really drive the news cycle in a lot of ways, and he's been pretty successful at that. It's his way of really staying in the news. He's not one to stay kind of behind the curtain and behind the scenes, and we saw yesterday evening when he came out and talked to reporters very briefly. He likes to come out and make appearances and such, but you talk to lawmakers on Capitol Hill and they would like him to tone it down in some respects, because they have to then respond when they're in Washington to everything he tweets.
And it can affect the markets. When he sends a tweet that criticizes Boeing, it impacts its stock price. Do you think he realizes, and is that why you call it a bully pulpit, he intends to use this tool in that way?
It's such an interesting dynamic from the campaign trail to the transition, then to the presidency, and it's something that Donald Trump really has not, at least publicly, recognized, although his staff and his transition team say he certainly knows the difference between the campaign trail and the presidential transition and the White House, but he does see it as an advantage, as a communication tool, and he sees it as a way, in many respects, to fight back against criticisms, and I think that's what the tweets against President Obama were about. He's facing lots of challenges, not only you know, being unpopular, 60% of the country still doesn't approve of him, but at the same time he's facing this idea of he has to unite the country in some way. He doesn't necessarily do that through these tweets, but he likes to make statements that way.
Well, he came to shake things up, so this is just another way for him to kind of use his voice with a different medium. When you talk to lawmakers, though, there's about this whole transition, and you look at from a big picture standpoint, there's one lawmaker in particular who's proposing a one president at a time act, specifically due to this type of situation that's going on. Do you think that works?
Well, it has been tradition, and most presidents-elect kind of go by that rule. You talk to people that are allies of Trump, though, and they say President Obama is interfering in this transition process in some respects. They say that with the UN resolution, with John Kerry's speech yesterday on the Israel and peace negotiations, that they are setting up kind of, they're getting more involved than when they should be winding down. That's their perspective. So it's a really interesting dynamic that you're seeing here, and Donald Trump's perspective is, look, I know that there's one president at a time, but, you know, I'm still coming in, and these are the things I want to do, and they're actually in direct contrast with a lot of what President
Can
is.
it be, I mean, you talked about the financial markets, Errol, but couldn't this be very confusing when you're talking about on the world stage, just kind of these leaders, too, taking in all this information?
Absolutely. And what's really interesting is, you know, with the Taiwan call was a perfect example of that, this kind of confusion. Also with him talking about Israel and the Israeli president saying, we're looking forward to Donald Trump coming in. You know, those two are forming a relationship, which is very interesting during this transition process. Netanyahu is going kind of directly to Trump in terms of his messaging, which is a really interesting dynamic that we haven't quite seen recently.
And we very well could see this kind of separation and division in direction increase with 3 more weeks to go until Donald Trump's inauguration. So we'll bring you back. Caitlin, Huey Burns
We're
with
following the tweets.
Real Clear Politics. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you.